Okay, we are graphing an example here where we have a nonlinear function. So to graph x squared plus 1, I'm going to jump around here a little bit and get my answers for y. I'm going to start right here in the middle. And I'm going to put 0 in for x, square it, and add 1. Okay? So we take the x value to the second power, and then we add 1. So 0 squared means 0 times 0, which is 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. That means there's a point on my graph at 0, 1. And let's go down here to 1. I'm going to do the positive ones first, and then we'll go through and do the negatives. So now we're going to take 1 and raise it to the second power, and then add 1. And the order of operation says that you should always do the exponent before you add. So do 1 squared, which is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. So if 1 is your input, 2 is your output. And then we'll put in 2. And I like to always make sure that I put my x in parentheses, especially if I'm going to square it. Because if you use your calculator to do this, you're going to want to make sure that's in parentheses, especially when we start putting these negative numbers in for x. If you don't use parentheses around the x, it's going to fail. It's going to give you an incorrect answer. All right, so 2 to the second power is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. So when 2 is my input, 5 is my output, and we'll go ahead and graph those now. And then we'll go ahead and do the negatives, all right? So we're going to do 0, 1, which will be right here. And we're going to plot 1, 2, which is right 1, up 2. And then 2, 5, and this is where you'll see that this is non-linear. 4, 5. See how it's curving? It's getting taller. This is going to make a parabola. You know, one of these guys? This is going to make a parabola, which is why they're calling it non-linear, because it's not a line. Just going to pause for a minute while we take a look at that. Now we're going to take a look at the negatives. And when we put negative numbers in for our input, take it to the second power and add 1. Let's see what we get. Again, if you're using your calculator, you want to make sure you use parentheses around -1 squared. Type it in just like that. And the reason is it's going to give you +1 when you do -1 to the second power. Because that's -1 times -1, which is +1. And then 1 plus 1 equals 2. So 2 is your answer when you put -1 in as your x. And let's notice that 1 produced 2 and -1 produced 2. So watch what happens on the graph. 1 produces 2. We already have that point. -1 produces 2. So it's kind of like a twin point, right? These are kind of like twins on each side of the line. And that's going to happen again over here when you go to put in -2 as your input. I think we get an output of 5 again, because -2 squared is +4. Anytime you square a negative, it'll make it turn positive. So that's +4. So you imagine that there's a 4 plus 1. And again, we get 5. So whether 2 is your input or -2 is your input, you're going to get 5 as your output. So -2, 5. So let's take a look here. When 2 went in, we got 5. When -2 goes in, we get 5. There's a twin point here and here. There's another twin point here and here, pair of twins. And this guy in the middle is all by itself. It's unique. It doesn't have a twin. Because when you have a parabola, like what we have here, there's always a line going right down the middle. Maybe you've heard of this before. It's called the line of symmetry. Don't worry about the vocabulary right now. We're not going to be tested on that. But you should be familiar with this shape that we just produced. It's known as a parabola. So if you want to trace the dots, go ahead and carefully do that like I just did. And we have a parabola. Parabola. And that concludes the first example. So I'm going to stop the video and we'll move on to the next one.